Just a little introduction. As Angie mentioned, my name is Will Maurer. I am currently um, a consultant in the talent acquisition space. If I'm being completely transparent and honest, it was something that was on my mind for a very long time. It was one of those things where I was thinking about it, I was scared about it, I was thinking about it, I was scared about it. I didn't know if I wanted to do it. I was scared about it. You probably picked up that I was scared about it. And then life kind of gave me a little kick in the hindquarters in that I found myself in a situation many of us did, which is laid off. And I was thinking, well, I think this is a sign from the universe that I'm going to go out and do that. So that's what I've been doing here most recently. And yes, today I am going to talk about people centered recruiting, and we'll get into that a little bit, but want to first do a little bit of housekeeping. So, in an attempt to have some audience participation, I am utilizing an app called Slido. So, if you have an opportunity, you can do this on your web browser as well. Go to slido.com, put in that number right there, 4157592, and you will be able to participate. I'll have a couple of questions for you. I'm really curious as to as to your answers. So while you're doing that, I want to talk about the topic a little bit because, well, first of all, I discovered that I have a weakness. I have a significant weakness that I've been working on for many years. I've tried a lot of different approaches. I have yet to get where I want to go. So any help that anyone can provide would be appreciated. But I am really, really awful at naming presentations. So I think that's how we got to pivot to people-centered recruiting. I don't even think I came up with that. I think Daniel did. So I don't, for as simplistic as it is, I couldn't even get there. But really, what I wanted to utilize this platform for was an opportunity to talk about a methodology, an approach, and I'll give you a little background on where that came from. So, not too long ago, I worked for an organization that used the concept of design thinking really at the center of everything that they did. Now, many of you are probably familiar with design thinking. It's a rather commonly taught practice these days, both in business and obviously design. And it's something that is used rather heavily by people who design and develop products, right? So I got some training and some education on design thinking. And of course, being the TA guy, the recruiting guy, I started thinking about how I could take this methodology and apply it to recruiting, right? I know they use it to design things and develop things, and they use it in manufacturing, but how can I use it in talent acquisition, right? So hopefully everybody had a chance to join. Who wants to join? A note, if you're having difficulties, Slido only lets so many people join. You have a cap. So if you can't get in, I apologize. They do offer a package that allows up to 5,000 participants. It costs more than my house, so I don't have it. But just, yeah. So if you're running into problems, that's what's going on there. Essentially, there are 5 steps to design thinking. And the first is to empathize. And so in this particular step, what you're thinking about is the end user. Now, in the case of a recruiter, the end user could be a couple of different things, but it's important to really understand the perspective, goals, motivations, thoughts of the people that are the end user. From there, you define either a question that you're trying to answer or a problem that you're trying to solve. So after you have collected that information, you're thinking about, okay, what am I really trying to accomplish here? From there, the next step, the third step is ideate, which is just a fancy word for brainstorm, right? So throughout the course of the last couple of days, as well as your various experiences as a recruiter, you are going to come across a ton of really interesting strategies, really effective strategies for finding talent. And as much as you would like to be able to implement them all every time you conduct a search, it's not feasible. You do have to make some determinations, but it's good to ideate. A lot of times I will do this in a room with other talent acquisition professionals, people that maybe have different perspectives or ideas than mine. If there's a whiteboard, that's fantastic. That's my favorite way to do it. But just really brainstorm, try to get creative, try to think of the different ways you might attack the problem that you're trying to solve, and the position that you're trying to fill. Now, from there, you do have to make some determinations, as I mentioned, right? You do have to ultimately land on your strategy for filling a role. That's where the prototype comes in. And I really like the word prototype because what that hints at is that that's not the final product. And it's not the final product because of the last step in the process, which is test. So obviously, once you've implemented your strategy, your plan, your prototype, right, it's important to take a look at your results. Take a look at where you are achieving success, maybe areas where you are not, and get feedback from your end user as well to see how they are feeling about your prototype up to that point. And if it doesn't quite fit the bill, you're going to go back in the process. Now, in some cases, that might be all the way back to the beginning, right? You might have to ask some additional questions and really get an idea. Maybe you're way off the mark, right? But you have to understand what the end user's reaction to this is. But in many cases, you're just going to go back to the ideate and prototype step. And again, test until you find really a solution that you believe is the best fit. Now, as you can imagine, this is incredibly effective when you're designing and developing products. But as I mentioned, I've been thinking about this kind of from a talent acquisition perspective. And that's what I want to share a little bit today. So here's our first active poll for those of you that joined at slido.com. So of those 5 stages, and for the record, there is no wrong answer. Empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. Which step do you think is the most important? And again, there is no right or wrong answer. So I'll just give that a couple minutes. Well, a minute. See? Interesting. Interesting. Good stuff. So 57% of you say empathize, which warms my heart. But the correct answer is they're all important. Quite frankly, each one of them is. But since we have limited time today, I am going to focus on empathy. Now, what I would like to see, I can't see the chat right now, but would love for you to drop in the chat. When you hear the word empathy, what do you think about? What pops into your head? How would you define empathy? If you don't mind, go ahead and join that. I'll obviously share my thoughts on empathy. But I was scrolling around the other day, kind of preparing for this today, And I came across this quote about empathy, which really kind of resonated with me. Um, and it's the last sentence, the first part of the last sentence that really resonated with me. Not only is empathy hard to outsource and automate, I think hard might even be misleading. If someone knows how to automate empathy, I would love to hear that. That would be fantastic. But it makes the world a better place, right? So when I think about my role in talent acquisition, I think that one of the skills that's been most valuable to me is empathy. And make no mistake, empathy is a skill. And not only is it a skill, it's a skill that you can develop. It's one that you can hone. It's one that you can get better at. And obviously, with some of the hot topics around our industry and our profession these days, some of those words really, really resonated, right? So, um, next poll for you, for everyone, and I'm just curious, this will just show up as a word cloud, but at what stage of the recruiting process can you best show empathy? Just curious as to your thoughts. First step. Oof, good answer so far. Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are all great answers. I cannot disagree with any of them. Fantastic. I love how when a lot of people give the same answer, they make it really big and put it in the middle of the screen, just so you can't miss it. But yeah, we see a lot of the same answers. I think they're all right, man. Whoever said rejection, I completely agree with that. Every step, I think, is a suitable answer. Um, um, yeah, the debrief, the the intake meeting, right? The strategy when you're working with the hiring manager to figure out your goals, like when you're going through the process, I think you can obviously show empathy. So that's fantastic. Thank you for participating. Appreciate that. Um, so one of the things I thought about when I was thinking about design thinking and talent acquisition was Will as a young recruiter. And it's funny to me because I actually had quite a bit of success as a young recruiter, but the more and more I think about it, the more I realize I really, really sucked at it. Like I was not, it's this crazy paradox. Like I don't quite understand, but I do remember when I got in there, I was frustrated a lot. I was frustrated with hiring managers a lot. I thought they didn't move fast enough. They don't know what they want. They don't. Um, they don't know anything about hiring. How can you not know about hiring? You're a hiring manager. They don't interview the right way. They don't do these things, right? I had all these frustrations that I had. And part of the reason I had those frustrations is because I wasn't practicing empathy, right? So if you think about the role of a hiring manager, which I have been that as well, I think that probably helps with being empathetic. But I think it's important that you look at things through the hiring manager's lens, right? So unless you work for some incredible organization that I'm not familiar with, I've worked for some big ones, but most hiring managers, they have direct reports. None of them are recruiters. They have KPIs, metrics they're held accountable to. None of them have anything to do with recruiting. They have deadlines, challenges, everything, right? Um, and and those things don't necessarily revolve around recruiting. So here, to me, is a fantastic opportunity to really display empathy, but more importantly, through that empathy, position yourself as a true advisor, a true consultant to the hiring manager. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit, and I'll start with the intake, right? So what are some questions I can ask on the intake? And again, I did some reflecting. I'd like to say I was really good at this. I don't know that I was, right? Especially early in my career. Um, and here's a scenario I thought about, right? So, I go to an intake and it's like, okay, you need a manufacturing engineer. They need 5 to 7 years of experience. They need to be familiar with this technology. Here's the must haves, here's the nice to haves, and here's some companies that we might go look at to find this kind of talent. And I'd be like, great. And off I go, trying to find a resume, trying to find a candidate that fits the bill, right? So while that approach can be effective, I realized that there isn't a whole lot of empathy in that approach. So I understood the requirements that the hiring manager was looking for. What I didn't understand is why they were looking for those things. What was driving that motivation? Why do they need a manufacturing engineer with 5 to 7 years? Why do they need to be familiar with this technology? Right? Why is that important to you? And so I thought of some things that you should know about your hiring manager when you do an intake session. So, what are they being held accountable to? What are their goals? What are their metrics? What are their strategic objectives? Right? The person that they are looking to hire, first of all, what business outcomes will this person own? And how does that fit within the strategic goals that you, Mr. or Mrs. Hiring Manager, are trying to achieve? So, how do they fit into the overall strategy? Right? How does this role relate to the other members of the team? How do their skills either complement the team or fill in a gap, maybe, that you currently don't have? And how will that skill set help elevate your team and position you to better achieve your goals? Okay, the position's open now. What are you doing right now? How are you addressing that gap? You obviously have identified a need, it's not there. How does that happen? How are you addressing that? And what kind of pain points result due to the fact that this position is open, right? So you kind of pick up on a theme here. This is displaying empathy, but there's kind of an ulterior motive there too, which is to really better understand the situation, better understand the problem that's trying to be solved. And in doing so, you can influence in a way that maybe you couldn't previously, right? By just asking about must haves, nice to haves, that kind of thing, right? So in this one, and you will notice, I know that Angie brought up skills. I know many people have brought up skills-based hiring. You will notice I avoid requirements if at all possible, and really like to focus on skills. And a lot of people have talked about the value of that. I couldn't believe in it more. In fact, if anybody just wants to have a conversation about skills-based hiring, please reach out to me. It's one of my favorite. I've talked to a lot of folks, kicked a lot of ideas around, thought about a lot of things. So would love to hear what other people are doing around this. But those are some questions that you can ask, right? That just gives you an example. Now, I would encourage you to really think of every interaction that you have, whether it be with hiring manager or candidate from an empathy perspective, and share some ideas like what kind of questions might you ask to really better understand the situation, empathize with the people that you're dealing with. Now, of course, empathy can relate to candidates as well. Um, and that's more than understanding how many years of experience do you have with C++, right? But what's your dream job? Tell me about that. I don't know if you've ever asked a candidate that, but it really opens up some really insightful things that you can learn about the candidate. What type of environment do you thrive in? Right. And again, these are open ended questions. So I'm not telling you this is the environment at this place and and are you okay with that? Instead, I'm asking what type of environment do you thrive in? Tell me about your journey. I like to do this one a lot. Like, so here we are today, talking to you. You're obviously contemplating the idea of a new role. I know where you are right now. I know what you're doing, but tell me how you got to where you are today and why you got to where you are today, right? Angie talked about this. Can't emphasize this enough. You can't personalize every interaction, but you should personalize as often as possible. And if you don't believe me, apply for a job online today. Wait about, I don't know, what's the average these days? 3, 4 months? I don't know. And get a form mass email that says something to the effect of, we really appreciate your interest. We're impressed by your qualifications, but unfortunately, we're moving forward with other candidates, right? And think about how you feel when you receive that, right? Again, we can't do it all the time for everyone, especially in high volume scenarios, but every chance you get, personalize your interactions. And really focus on communication and transparency, right? I know that in the word cloud there, somebody put rejection. I think it's really important to be transparent and upfront with candidates, even if it's not good news, right? It's not the fun part of the job, but if you're truly being empathetic and thinking about, I mean, we're talking about people's careers, we're talking about people's livelihoods, the way that they provide for their family. That's an empathetic view. And if you look at it that way, it becomes much easier to have those hard conversations. And we already touched on this, but again, even in my conversations versus education and pedigree, I really like to talk about skills and times and examples when candidates have had to really display those skills in a work environment. So why is this important? Why is empathy important? What is the advantage? Why would I go through this, Will? Well, I have some reasons. But again, these are just my thoughts and would love to hear from anybody else who has thoughts on this. But first of all, asking those questions, and I alluded to this before, but really gives you an opportunity to position yourself as a strategic advisor, right? So, a hiring manager, I understand the scenario that you're in. I'm not just somebody that's going to just throw resumes over the fence and hope that one sticks. Instead, what I'm going to do is try to find a solution to the challenges that you're facing. And in doing so, you're going to build relationships, right? So that's really important. If you think about being empathetic with a candidate, having those conversations, really understanding their motivations, or talking with a hiring manager, hey, what are the challenges you're facing? What are you trying to get done? What do you feel pressure about, right? You can build relationships. And I think we all know that relationships are incredibly valuable in just about every situation. You never know when you're going to cross paths with someone again. From a candidate's perspective, when you're empathetic, you come across as more approachable. You're not robotic. You're not treating them like a number. And as a result, they're going to be much more apt to refer people to you. They're going to feel comfortable letting you know about people within their network, which they may have relationships with. Again, I touched on this, but it greatly improves your credibility. So you understand the business, you understand the motivations of the hiring manager, the candidate, you understand the strategy, how people fit into that strategy. And again, it positions you to become a solution provider, and it allows you to give candidates a realistic view of what the role is about and what they can expect when they step into the role. So increased credibility is there. Um, and again, can't emphasize this enough, but in doing so, you're really turning the focus to solutions again and skills versus bullet points on a resume, which there's a lot of benefits to that. Again, we don't have time to go into skills based hiring, but it allows you to present candidates more effectively. And to me, something near and dear to my heart, allows you to be more inclusive in your recruiting efforts, right? So now all of a sudden it opens up the candidate pool. You'll see more diversity in your candidate pool. You'll see more options in your candidate pool. So, yeah, just some of the benefits that I've identified in terms of recruiting with empathy. Again, if anybody has thoughts, other ways, other benefits, please share. That's what the community is for. So appreciate that. But here's the one that I think should be near and dear to all of us, right? Because I don't know how far this goes back. I'm trying to think. I've attended a number of conferences. I saw Shannon on stage a bunch of times at SourceCon. I've seen Andy speak a number of times. Steve, all these folks, right? At whether it be ERE or SourceCon or all these major industry events. RecFest coming up next month. I'll be there. Hope you are too. But we've been talking about this for a long time. Like, what role is AI going to play in our industry, in our profession? And for me, it's like, well, I want to be able to utilize AI because I want to be better at my job. And if there's tools there that I can utilize for me to be more effective, I want to do it. But I don't want to be replaced by it. Right. And those are conversations that come up. Like, those are topics that come up. But I'm going to tell you, there's nothing that can replace the human element. And one of the best human elements is empathy, right? You can't replace that with an algorithm. And so I think it's really important that's another reason it's really important to focus on empathy. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. I think I'm pretty close to time. I probably have some time to answer questions if anybody has any, but if I don't get to it this time around, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to anybody. I love the community. It's been so helpful to me. I don't have time to tell all the stories in the way that the recruiting community has helped me. So please feel free to reach out. And with that, I guess I'll open it up.